viewers, I'm Asif Ramiz Dawoodi, and I would like to welcome you all to today's important discussion on the recent deadly drone attacks in Abu Dhabi by the Houthis militia and the terrorist groups. We'll try to understand its implications and impacts on the Gulf countries and India. We have two seasoned, experienced, and esteemed guests with us. I have to welcome Ambassador Deepak Vohra and Major General Ashwini Siwach. I start with the strongest condemnation of this inhuman attack, where, as we know, that there were 3 people killed and 6 injured in that drone strike on oil facility. And a fire was sparked at Abu Dhabi's international airport. This kind of disruptive attacks by the Houthis militia and the terrorist groups are to be condemned strongly. Saudi Arabia on Tuesday reiterated its condemnation of a deadly attack that targeted an oil facility in the UAE. Well, I was just reading the leading English newspaper, that is Arab News, where Faisal J. Abbas, the editor-in-chief, writes that Iran is currently not the only enabler of these terrorists. They would never have dared to strike had they not felt empowered by Biden administration's failure to support its allies. So here there are many things that we are going to understand from our experts. There are some questions that I want that our experts can try to clarify and help the viewers to understand the current scenario and how to deal with these problems. I just want to ask Ambassador Deepak Vohra a question. As we know that the United States and its credibility and reliability is doubtful now. We know that US is withdrawing from this region and shifting its attention and focus mostly to the Indo-Pacific region. If US does not stand with the traditional partners, should the region depend or rely on the US now?
Thank you very much, Professor Asif Ramiz. Always a pleasure to be with you, to learn from you, and of course from General Siwach, who's an outstanding soldier. You asked a very intelligent question. There's no easy answer. Basically, you've said, can this region or anywhere in the world rely on the United States? US credibility is at an all-time low. We've seen what's happened in Afghanistan. It was supposed to be a withdrawal. It became a rout towards the end. The United States is pretty much going through what it did in 1968. I don't know if you remember, you're too young, but that was a time when the country pretty much split apart at the seams. And 68 was the time when the Vietnam War was unwinnable. The sexual revolution was going on. Lots of funny things were happening in campuses all over the United States. A French advertising agency even said, see the United States before it is too late. It was the biggest crisis in the US since the Civil War. And what we see today in 2022 with Joe Biden's popularity tanking, etc., is something very, very similar. The United States is totally concerned with its internal issues and is really not going to be able to focus, apart from making all these threatening noises. We'll teach you a lesson, we'll do this, we'll do that, but they're unable to do anything. Look at what they've been able to do to China. It's zilch. If anybody has been able to take on China and teach them a lesson, it's us. So let me go to this issue that you've raised about the terrorist attacks by the Houthis and what encouraged them. Till about 1994, you might recall, General Siwach, you would remember this too, the Taliban were really very little known outside the madrasas in Pakistan. They went into Afghanistan, changed the region and the world forever. The Houthis is a term that we began to hear in the 2000s. Now, the Houthi movement, as you know, Professor, is officially called Ansar Allah, or supporters of God. And colloquially, simply the Houthis, that's what they are known as. This is an armed Islamic political movement that emerged in North Yemen in the 1990s. predominantly Zaidi Shias, whose leadership is drawn largely from the Houthi tribe. By the way, I've served in this area, so I know all about these characters. They were initially in opposition to the Yemeni president, Ali Abdullah Saleh, and they said this guy is corrupt, he's a chamcha of the Saudis and of the Americans, etc., etc. Then, of course, we know that in 2004, their leader was killed by the Yemeni army and the Houthi insurgency began. Now, what happened? Let me take you back 5-6 years. 2015, take a look at the Middle East. You are based there. What's happening? Islamic State is rising. Libya is gone. Syria is burning. Instability in post-coup Egypt, fear of some Gulf leaders that Iran is going to become the king of the region. There's a siege mentality 5-6 years ago. And in that context, Saudi Arabia and its primary partner, the UAE, they led a military intervention in Yemen to roll back the Houthis. Right or wrong, the jury is still out on that one. It has created what the UN says is the world's greatest humanitarian catastrophe in living memory. 9 out of 10 Yemenis, so we are told, are either starving, don't have enough to eat, are very ill, etc., etc. But what is basically what we are seeing there is two forces colliding head on. On the side of the Gulf monarchies, a determination to ensure that Iran does not regain a foothold by winning back its former allies, Sudan and Eritrea. When I was your ambassador to Sudan for 5 years, Iran was riding high. And then after I left, well, not because I left, but after I left, Iran was booted out by the Sudanese and told to go home. Ditto Eritrea. Then there are all these rivalries, you know, in the Gulf Cooperation Council, June 2017, when Qatar was totally isolated, and by extension, its buddy Turkey, all kinds of funny things have been happening. Then we have been seizing weapons all the time in the Red Sea that are meant for the Houthis, according to the fellows who seize them. We've seized cash, everything. We means the people in that area have been doing this. The Houthis ousted the legal president of Yemen. They've taken control of the capital, Sana'a, much of the country, 2014, 2015. Now, sir, interestingly, they've grown from strength to strength. Where did they get their weapons from? Some people say Iran. I think they also captured dozens of tanks and masses of heavy weaponry from the Yemeni armed forces. Where did the Islamic State get its initial weaponry? General Siwach will know this. When they were in Iraq, the Iraqi army ran away, leaving behind all the American weaponry, which they took. And just as the jokers in Afghanistan, known as the Taliban, they are supposed to have taken a lot of the American weaponry that was left behind. Interestingly, Professor Saab, during the Yemeni civil war, the Houthis have even acquired an offensive naval capability. Happy birthday. They are developing a navy also now. Where is all this coming from? Initially, it was all very unsophisticated, rocket-propelled grenades being shot at vessels close to the shore. But now, they've got a whole lot of coastal missile batteries and patrol boats belonging to the Yemeni military. These are being gradually converted, adapted, and modernized. Then they have this massive propaganda machine, which is doing an amazing job. Now, people say that Iran is supporting them. The Houthis deny this. Well, they may have received some support from Iran, but the support that the US and the UK have been giving the Saudi Arabian coalition that is clobbering Yemen at the moment, this is much larger than what Iran is doing for the Houthis. So now we come to what has happened in 2 or 3 days ago in Abu Dhabi, which is very, very condemnable. They shouldn't be doing funny things like this. You might recall, sir, that was it about a couple of weeks ago that the Houthis even seized a UAE-registered commercial vessel, a ship, on which we had 7 or 8 Indian nationals. And you've heard of this racket called the United Nations. They did what they always do. They appeal for maximum restraint. They have nothing else. It's a floppy that they keep on playing. They have nothing new to say. So now the Houthis, they asked the Houthis, please release this UAE-registered ship, sir. Please note the sequence. You know, please join the dots. They first seize the ship and then they lob their missiles. And the UN in both cases, oh, restraint, restraint, restraint. Well, I mean, thank you very much. Can you say something else for a change? Apart from maximum restraint, they can't. So what is happening, we are seeing now, sir, is the balance of power, not just in Yemen, but also in the entire Gulf, is now churning. We don't know what route it is going to take. The Houthis look to Iran for ideological and religious guidance. Iranians are responsible. They've been advising them, guiding them. The Houthis would not be able to use the kind of sophisticated guided missiles fired at the UAE. Where did these drones come from, Far? Did you make them in your backyard? Somebody has given them the drones. And the best drone capability in that region is either the Turks, who play their own dirty game in the region because that character who's their president now wants to be the new Ottoman Sultan, or it's the Iranians. Therefore, it's a witch's brew. It's a cauldron that is boiling. क्या हो रहा है वहां पे सब लोग कुछ ना कुछ उसके अंदर अपना हाथ डाल रहे हैं. Everybody is playing for his own interest. Why has Abu Dhabi been targeted? It's very, very clear. Because with the Saudis, the UAE is leading, is part of this coalition that is trying to restore the previous government in Yemen, and they are trying to clobber the Houthis. The Houthis are now hitting back. Sir, what has happened? Let me assure you, General Siwach, that the reputation of the UAE as an island of stability and peace in an ocean of turbulence has been dented very badly. We used to talk about this often. Look, in the Middle East, everything is boiling, but the UAE is this one beacon of stability. They are very peaceful people. They have a very good intelligence network, and such stuff was not going to happen. Well, that argument is no longer valid. Why did Indians go to the UAE? Why did anybody from anywhere in the world go to the UAE? A safe place to work. It's a good place to do business. It's a good place to live in a troubled region. And what have the Houthis said? This is a successful military operation. And they have warned the UAE that if you don't behave yourselves, if you continue bombing Yemen, then we'll teach you a lesson. So this is the basic message that is being delivered. No one can save the UAE from the Houthis except the Emiratis themselves. Pull out of Yemen, stop bombing us, and we'll leave you alone. Try fighting with us, go run to your Uncle America, because Uncle America is too involved with his issues with COVID and 1 million Americans being infected every day. Joe Biden's popularity falling so low that you need a microscope to see where he has gone, etc., etc. Their message is very clear. You mess around with us, we will mess around with you. And therefore, we are headed for a prolonged period of instability. The last island of hope in that region, that it would somehow escape the turbulence, that island too has been afflicted by that turbulence. I'm sorry to have to say this, but the Middle East at this point of time is not someplace I'd like to go. Finally, sir, Abu Dhabi was, I think there is this airlines, while the Emirates flies via Dubai, they have the other one called Etihad. I think for them, Abu Dhabi was the hub. I don't know what's going to happen. The airport, as we speak, oil prices, of course, have spiked. As we speak, the airport is not totally open for commercial flights. And if the Houthis manage to shut it down, I shudder to think of what will happen. That is the basic scenario.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I took so much of time.
No, it's fine. That was quite informative, and what a brilliant analysis. And I must say that, whenever I have a discussion with you, sir, I personally learn a lot from you, and you are kind of yourself is the ocean of knowledge when it comes to geopolitics and the Middle Eastern region, or you talk about any region. So that's really great to have you here, sir.
Thank you.
And now, since we have honored guest and of course a brother and friend, Major General Gen Siwach, sir, we try to understand whether the US credibility and reliability is doubtful or not, which has been very clearly, explained by Ambassador Deepak Vohra. Let's go and go to another question. I have something here related to military or other kinds of agreements, and you are the right person to take that question. As per the media reports, Major General Siwach, we know that GCC's 4 ministers were in China. Apart from the energy agreement, the overall military and security tilt can also be observed. Under this scenario, while the US is in the withdrawal state, if China dominates the region, how is it going to impact the Indian foreign policy and security, etc.?
Thank you very much, Dr. Asif. And I must appreciate Dr. Deepak Vohra has very candidly explained the complete uh, genesis of the situation and as to how should we go about it. Now, as far as on today's situation is concerned in Gulf, there is a churning effect which is taking place. There are lot of actors and characters which are there, which are changing this thing. If you see it, very correctly appreciated, the US, which used to be a big player once upon a time in Middle East, is no more interested in this area, and it is now shifting its focus from Middle East to Indo-Pacific. So therefore, what has happened in Afghanistan is now the ground reality that they are not no more interested in this area. A vacuum has been created, and very rightly you are trying to point out: is it China trying to fill this? Now, this is a very important question. Now, we have to understand who are the actors and characters before we unfold the thing further. You know, there is a Sunni camp and there is a Shia camp. As far as the Sunni camp is concerned, it is the Saudi which is ruling the roost, and Iran is the one which was heading the Shia camp. And the majority of the countries were with the Saudis, and especially Iran was isolated along with Turkey, Yemen mainly. But as the situation stands today, the Israel has changed the complex quite a bit. Israel is now trying to get a better relationship with majority of Muslim countries in Middle East. That is one thing which has changed it. Second thing is, even Iran is trying to mend its ways, trying to have relation with UAE and Saudi. Now this is also happening in Middle East. So the churning effect is taking place. The relationship are now changing its stance as per the ground reality. Now, having said so, what is the Yemen doing? As on today, Houthi, there is no doubt what Dr. Vohra has appreciated. They are the one which are controlling majority of Yemen. They don't want this basically the coalition group of Saudi, UAE, UK, France, and US to trouble them. They are just trying to show their strength, and they are trying to dissuade UAE and Saudi to do anything against them in Yemen. Remember that Yemen, this Houthi is Shia, and so is the Iran. Iran has been backing Houthis, there is no doubt about it, in terms of training, in terms of weapons, ammunition, that has been given. The support was always there from Iran. But that is also there. The Houthis have become a very, very potent, one can say, a terrorist organization over a period of time, when they are even thinking of having their sort of a naval wing, exactly like once upon a time the LTT had. So this is a force to reckon with. Now the point which is coming is, as the vacuum has been created, America is no more interested in this area. Now this vacuum is trying to be filled by China. China is coming in a big way in Middle East, and this is a cause of concern for us also. Though even UAE and India and Saudi, we are one country which has a best of our relation with everyone, be it Iran, be it Saudi, the UAE, be it Israel. So therefore we have advantage. But there are limitations as far as India is concerned, as far as the trade is concerned. Though the business things have already started off, the UAE has shown interest in purchasing Tejas Mark 1 Alpha, and they are trying to, there is a talk going on more than about 50 Tejas Mark 1 Alpha by the UAE. Also by the Saudi Arabia trying to show some interest in our BrahMos missile. Also the UAE is trying to invest some in Jammu and Kashmir. So that also is taking place, but I don't think we can compete to China to that extent, because China, that World Trade Initiative also going through the Middle East, also China trying to have the business as well as economic relation with UAE and Saudi Arabia. That is going on. So we have to be very vigilant and alert. here the America is not going to play a major role now. Now, why America is not playing major role? Two, three factors are there. One is their focus is shifting from Middle East toward the Indo-Pacific. Second is, in time to come, the oil is going to lose its that currency value. The oil will not be that much important in next 10 to 20 years when it will be basically electric power or any other non-fossil energy. So that point also is very important, that Saudi and UAE, all these countries are understanding. They want to diversify their economy by not only dependent on oil, but also on other things. And that's why India become also one of the major partners. Now, another issue which is coming is how it is affecting India immediately. Now, in case the instability comes in Middle East, it affects us two ways. One is that we are dependent on oil. Almost 80% of our oil come through import. Only 20% we can produce domestically. Out of that 80%, 60 to 70% is coming from Middle East. So if there is any instability, or there is escalation of price, or there is sort of a chaos and confusion, it directly affects us. Second thing is, there are more than about 30 to 40 lakhs Indians which are working in this region, and they are the one which send their remittance back to India. Now, in case this becomes disturbed, that is another thing where it can hit our economy. So overall, we will like the situation to normalize, but certainly things seemingly looks to be quite complex as well as unstable. Now, the point is how things will unfold. We have to wait and watch. There are a number of actors and characters which are playing. The turning effect is taking place. Relationships are now changing in Middle East. Iran also want to mend its way with UAE as well as Saudi, because they are feeling it that joint comprehensive plan of action, which was a nuclear plan, which possibly they were thinking after Joe Biden comes, he will again join it, and the economic sanctions which were there on Iran will be removed, but that has not happened. Joint comprehensive plan of action, America has not joined, and therefore Iran is feeling quite tight as far as the economy is concerned. It wants to mend its ways, especially with UAE and Saudi, possibly for economic reason. That point also we have to see. But overall, a complex situation, a situation which is fast changing and dynamic, but India has a major role to play. Possibly may not able to compete China, but we have a space. We must look toward Middle East as a future market, and we try to invest there. We try to develop the economic relation. Today, the economy, the geoeconomics will play a major role than a geopolitical. Dr. Asif.
Very well said, sir. Very well said. And you covered almost every area that one needs to understand. And you mentioned about Iran. You talked about the diversified economy that the Saudi leadership and its vision is trying to achieve with its Saudi Vision 2030, and how India and Arab world share stronger relationships. So let me just get here something related to Saudi's vision and how India shares stronger relations. We know you talked about around 4 million or 3 million Indians living in this region. Let me just tell you that only Saudi Arabia has around 3.5 million Indians working here at this moment. It fluctuates, it goes up or down, but despite the fact that during this pandemic, many expatriates had to leave and they had to go back to their countries, still India has around 3.5 million workers and employees working here in this region, which is a good signal and which is really something big. Now, the thing is here is like, since we have a stronger expatriate community, we know that Iran and China share good relations. And they have signed $500 billion agreement for around 25 years.
25 years.
Yeah. So is China taking advantage of it, Ambassador Vohra?
That's a very good question. China's Belt and Road Initiative, I call it Bilk and Rob, is not succeeding. It's dead. The virus has killed it. You know, we can all talk about it till the cows come home. Such and such countries interested, such and such countries interest. Even the China-Pakistan economic corridor is dead, essentially because the Pakistanis are beginning to realize there's nothing in it for them. China's idea of win-win is, we do this, I win. We don't do this, I still win. It doesn't make any sense to anybody. So they are exposed. Now, as far as China's involvement, General Siwach, in this area is concerned, I wouldn't be too worried about it. Remember that this is an Islamic area. And if there is one thing that the Chinese don't like, it's not the Uyghurs. They don't like Islam, period. The elimination of the Uyghurs is not directed against a community. It's directed against the religion. The elimination of the Tibetans is not because the Tibetans look different. It's the elimination of Buddhism as we know it. So the Chinese cannot understand this, they cannot appreciate this, and the Middle Eastern countries all know that China is no friend of theirs. Why do they tolerate it? Well, if the fellows trying to help us or give us, pretending to help us and giving us money, we'll take his money, but we won't give it back. No, I don't think we should be too concerned. What we should be concerned, as you have rightly pointed out, General Siwach, is that if this confrontation between Saudi Arabia and Iran and their proxies continues the way it is going, then we'll see a very, very unstable Middle East. If that happens, we've been through this in 1973, you remember? We went through it earlier in 1967 when oil supplies were interrupted and we were in deep trouble. Today, the situation is not materially different. We still rely on imports where we get from Iraq, Saudi Arabia, et cetera, et cetera. Slowly it is decreasing because now we are looking at new and renewable sources of energy. But what will happen in the event that the Middle East explodes is that our economy will take a hit. What role can India play? There's no question about it. If we have a little bit of time or if when we rejoin each other, I'll tell you all about it because we can play a terrific role. Sir, I remember in the 80s, General Siwach, do you remember there used to be a character called Dawood Ibrahim or something like that, Pakistan's son-in-law. The fellow now lives in Pakistan. I used to see him on television, the India-Pakistan cricket matches in the UAE. He would be strutting around like a peacock and nobody did anything. We asked them so many times, send him back. They did not, till they were hit by terrorism themselves. And now they have started sending back everybody there. Even the fellow we don't want, they say, we'll take him back. We don't need the character. Here's this fellow. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was honored by the UAE with their highest civilian award. There's a Hindu temple that is being built. You know, things have changed. We were thrown out of the inaugural meeting, the formation meeting of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, 1969. You might remember this in Rabat in Morocco. And 3 years ago, Mrs. Sushma Swaraj was the guest of honor at the 50th conference in Abu Dhabi of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. So they are beginning to understand the significance of India. When push comes to shove, General Siwach, they will ask you means the Indian army, come and protect us. And we will go. They won't ask the Chinese to come. Because as Ho Chi Minh had once screamed at his cadres, you guys want the Chinese to come inside here to keep the French out. Let me tell you one thing. The last time the Chinese came, he said, they stayed for 1,000 years. Once they come, they won't go away. Once the Indian comes, as we've seen in Bangladesh, they'll do what they have to and then they will leave. They understand this, sir. Our reputation travels. Therefore, today, the future of the Middle East, because the US is withdrawing, because the British withdrew from the Suez many, many years ago, their future is inextricably linked to the strength of India, the diplomatic, military, and political strength of India, which is why the UAE is talking of $100 billion worth of commercial exchanges with India. We are training their people. You should know this better than I do. We have special training programs for Emirati soldiers. We are helping them to the extent that we can. There's talk of their acquiring weapons from India, et cetera, et cetera. The bigger plot is very, very simple, the macroeconomic thing. When we are in trouble, there's one country that we can depend on without hesitation. That's a country called India.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Vohra. Let me engage Major General Siwach now. We know that despite sanctions on Iran, China is the sole protector of Iran. In this case, is China acting both as firefighter and incinerator? What's your take on this?
Oh, no, very correct. Dr. Asif, very rightly you have brought out the question. But the appreciation which is conducted by Dr. Deepak Vohra, I fully agree. There is a reason to believe that China is not a dependable partner. That everyone knows. And China-Pakistan economic corridor, a project of $62 billion, is struggling. Though it is a flagship project, it is almost 70% not working. And Pakistanis have realized that it did not give them a much benefit. It is only China which is going to benefit. So having learned this lesson, possibly the Middle East also know when China comes in Middle East, it is their own interest, not the interest of the Saudi Arabia or UAE. To that extent, they will always appreciate and welcome Indians, provided we are capable of going there. I suppose our economy is opening up and there is a lot of chance of sort of having a economy which is linked between India and Saudi and UAE and other countries in Middle East, because India provides them a big market. That is the one thing which one has to understand. The strength of the India is that the population is also a strength to some extent. People which are working there. And second thing, which point which was brought out very categorically, that Indian Army, Indian Defense Forces in a big way is training people from Middle East. That's a very good thing and they can really depend on India. Now the question which you raised about the Iran, that China is playing a major role in Iran, no doubt about it. They have this treaty for 25 years. So China will try to exploit a situation anywhere if they get a foothold. It depends upon it how they take it. Today, Iran does not have much choice because Iran is isolated. Iran is economically in a very poor state. There are a lot of sanctions which have been put by US and other countries. Nothing much has happened. So therefore, Iran today need some investment, some help, economic help, and which China is coming. So Iran does not have much choice. Iran will get dependent on China. How much China make use of it, it's a time will only tell. But the fact is, Iran is financially in a big trouble. Not only Iran, it is Pakistan, now Sri Lanka, all these countries, one by after the other, you are finding it out, which are neighbors to India, are in a financial crisis. And that is a cause of concern for India also. Instability in these areas bring instability in the region, and to some extent it can come back to India also. But having said so, India will play a major role in Middle East, but we should be very careful for doing anything, because economy will play a major role. And the simple thing which is very important for India is that India has got friends everywhere in Middle East, starting from Israel, then going to UAE and Saudi Arabia, even Iran, because our Chabar port may play a major role. I hope and pray that Iran will also realize that this is called gateway to Middle East. After Chabar, when we cross Afghanistan, we then connect north-south transport corridor. This will be the new economy of the world. And just together with Iran, with Afghanistan, and with the Middle East, and then going to north-south transport corridor, the Russia also get involved. This will bring a lot of goodness. But I will try to just add two things, that India has a very bright future in Middle East, be it Saudi Arabia, be it UAE. Now, what is happening is that like Saudi are the four largest partner as trade partner, which is there after US, China, and UAE. So therefore, one thing is there, the trade is almost $35 billion. And we are importing from there the crude oil as well as the gas. 30% the LPG is from Saudi Arabia. And that way also again from UAE. So therefore, the chances of having a more trade, more than about $50 to $60 billion in time to come, there is a scope. That's the thing. And India is providing them rice, also giving the machinery. And now since the India is becoming a hub center of producing the weapon within our own country, domestically our defense market is going to do well. I suppose the weapon is another thing which can be there. where we can sort of provide to UAE as well as Saudi Arabia and other Middle East. Overall, I will say that India has got a lot of potential, and Saudi Arabia, UAE has also able to do trade with us. The supply chain which were earlier in China are also shifting to Indonesia, Vietnam, and India. That also gives a very positive sign to these countries. I suppose both India as well as Middle East countries stand to gain by mutually improving the trade relation, focus on geo-economics rather than geopolitical. That is, I think, a mantra for future. Dr. Asif.
Thank you very much, Major General Siwach. Very well explained. And Ambassador Vohra, as we know, that Saudi has always been the target of Iran. And Iran and UAE, reasonably, they have very good relations. And there had not been this kind of attacks on UAE in the past. This one is perhaps the second one. So here, considering this, do you think that the attack or the ongoing scenario that is happening in this region, is it going to have some sort of impact on the relationship between Iran and UAE as well?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. The fact that the Houthis have managed to lob their missiles across Saudi Arabia and hit the UAE, they don't share a common border. Yemen has a common border with Saudi Arabia, but Yemen does not have one with UAE. So the missiles would have flown across Saudi Arabia and hit the UAE. That has given the world an indication of the new capability that the Houthis have acquired. More important, as General Siwach very rightly said, that in the last few years, the Arabs, despite what China is doing there, they've started looking at India with much greater respect. They share intelligence with us, like the Israelis, on jihadi groups. You know, sir, sometimes we tend to forget what happened in October 21, when the media talked of a new Quad emerging in this region. The first ever meeting of foreign ministers of India, Israel, USA, and UAE. It was a hybrid meeting when our foreign minister, the outstanding human being called as Jaishankar, he had gone to Israel. So the Indian and the Israeli foreign minister were sitting there together, and the other two, the UAE and the United States, were in virtual mode. They talked about joint infrastructure projects, transportation technology, maritime security, economics and trade, and they talked about many, many more joint projects. Now, what did Minister Jaishankar say to the other three? That is to Israel, UAE, and the US. The three of you are among the closest relationships we have, if not the closest. What did Blinken say, the Secretary of State? You are our three most strategic partners. What did the UAE foreign minister say? We have such a strong and diverse relationship with each one of you, especially India. So what are we saying now? So what are we looking at? We are looking at a much greater role by India in this region. They tolerate China. They do not like China. And if you're talking about the relationship, which General Siwach also referred to, between China and Iran, so it's a marriage of inconvenience. They both have similar difficulties with the West. They are under sanctions, etc. So they are kissing on both cheeks and saying, we absolutely love you. For India, sir, may I just put it like this? The UAE has consistently in the past decade supported our policies, the airstrikes across the line of control following the Uri attacks, the abrogation of Kashmir's special constitutional status. You remember the Pakistanis were so angry that the Emiratis did not comment on that or criticize India, that they talked of a parallel OIC, etc. The Saudis gave that Khan fellow, that chap who pretends to be the Prime Minister of Pakistan, gave him a couple of tight slaps on his cheek. Then after saying, okay, I'll go for this meeting in Kuala Lumpur, he backed off at the very last moment, said I was ill or something like that. What is happening, sir? When I was studying sociology, I was studying economics, we were taught Robert Merton's law of unintended consequences. one of the unintended consequences of what the Houthis have done is that India's role now will become strengthened. Because the one nation that can protect them, that can train them, we've talked about their military training. I was one of the directors, the first directors of the Foreign Service Institute of India, and we had a number of trainees from the Gulf countries, especially the UAE. We would ask them, well, what do you think of the training? They said, apart from the professional competence, which is unrivaled, we feel totally at home in India. You think any one of them will feel at home in China? I'm not sure, General Siwach, that they will. They come to us because, so what the Indian diaspora says, you should know this, Professor Ramesh, that Dubai is the 5th largest Indian city. So I mean, everybody understands this, looking at the number of Indians who are over there.
And
they
Saudi
feel very
Arabia has the largest Indian diaspora.
There you are.
Very
there.
good.
So Jeddah is the 6th largest Indian. That was the joke that was said by our diaspora. So what I'm saying, so the unintended consequences are kicking in. The Houthis have lobbed their missiles, and the UAE and others will now turn to us and say, buddy, tell us how to protect us. And they will not ask China, because China is quite capable of giving missiles to the Houthis and then telling the other fellows, look, we'll teach you how to deal with the missile. Nobody trusts them. They trust India. Therefore, I believe that what has happened in the past, whether the hijacking of the ship that had 7 or 8 or 9 Indian sailors, which is still, by the way, in Houthi custody, or the attack on the oil installation, the oil trucks and the airport, I believe that because one of the things that these countries will be looking at is their own security, and the power, the great power in our region that can assure that is India. So in a very strange kind of way, India's importance and significance in this region will increase because of what has happened.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Vohra. One last thing, as sensible citizens of a very reliable and country, India, we are proud of our country. Okay, it's our duty to stand with our friends. We know that India is, stronger, and we have stronger ties with the Arab countries, GCC and Saudi Arabia, UAE. You talk about any of these countries. So it's time that we should stand with the nations that always stand with us. You remember during pandemic, how Saudi Arabia sent oxygen and how India sent vaccines. And this shows what kinds of stronger ties we share with each other. When it comes to the UAE, we have similar kinds of ties. So I would like to take this opportunity to use this platform to strongly condemn these kinds of, coward and inhuman attacks. And we should try to, it's our social, human, and it's our responsibility, all sorts of responsibility to condemn these kinds of attacks. So just last concluding remarks, if we can have it from Major General Siwach, to conclude this discussion until we meet, next time with a new topic together. And let me just have Major General Siwach just to have a few words to conclude this, please.
See, I will only say that India will have a very growing relationship with UAE and Saudi, as well as with other Middle East countries. The future of the Middle East is toward India, and the future of India is toward the Middle East, because both these countries share, both India as well as the Middle East countries, especially UAE and Saudi Arabia, has the commonality dependent on their past. And as the things are unfolding, you will find that dependence on each other will increase and improve. And so will be the India's important thing in Middle East, and Middle East trying to find a market in India. I think dependence on each other, when they will increase, the respect for each other will improve. I suppose the geo-economy will play a major role in time to come. Thank you.
Very well said, sir. We always meet each other. We share ideas on television and news channels. Having these kinds of discussions here, that gives a different kind of feeling. I have no words. I'm beyond, I mean, it's like beyond any words of appreciation that you gave your precious time to have your thoughts and views shared. I really thank you once again, and hopefully we'll meet again soon with a new different topic. Thank you very much, sir. Have a great day.
Look forward to that.
Day. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
sir.
Thank
Thank you, sir. I'm wearing the cap too.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.